Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Shearer. I am the Senior Manager of Food Acquisition and Advocacy for Food Bank of Iowa, but today I am talking to you as a member of the Food Bank, or the Iowa Food Bank Association, which represents the entire state of Iowa. The mission of IFBA is to support the Feeding America food banks and their affiliates serving Iowa in their work to ensure that sufficient food is accessible to all. A little bit about me. I actually have a background in fashion merchandising from Iowa State University. I'm obviously not doing anything with that. I was in college and I just decided I didn't care about that, really. I still buy food. I just buy food instead of clothes, and I prefer it better that way. After I graduated, I kind of took a winding road, and I worked just some whatever jobs, and my mom has a saying that you have to have something that feeds your soul. And if you get that from work, great, but a lot of people don't. So I was not getting that from work, so I just kind of arbitrarily chose to start volunteering at our food pantry. I grew up in Urbandale. For those of you that are from Des Moines, Urbandale is a suburb of Des Moines. It's pretty affluent, so it just highlighted that we all kind of live in a bubble sometimes. It also highlights that food insecurity doesn't have a look or a uniform. I didn't know that there was a food pantry in Urbandale. I didn't know there needed to be a food pantry in Urbandale, so I volunteered there, and then I worked there for about 5 years, and then I made my way here. Another rambling story, and then I'll get to my presentation. When I was in college, I interned at 17 magazine in New York City, and I would not trade that for anything in the world. I'm obviously not from New York, and it was very, very obvious when I was there, because multiple times people said, "You're not from here, are you?" And I said, "I'm not. I'm so sorry." I was usually in their way, like a deli or a coffee shop or something, so they were just trying to be nice and get me to move. But they said, "Well, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Iowa." And I'm not kidding, multiple times they said, "Oh my gosh, you're from Iowa, you must be really nice, and you must work really hard." And I was like, well, there are worse stereotypes to have about people than you're nice and you work hard. And we are nice and we do work hard. Also I have a presentation, sorry. So the mission. And then food insecurity is a product of poverty. And low-income households are often forced to choose between choices, necessities like food, healthcare, utilities, and housing. COVID, inflation, and a host of other issues that are still persistent to this day caused further strain on individuals that were already facing food insecurity. Food banks are seeing the same thing that you're seeing. I know when I go to the store, I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, that costs what? So I see the same thing in my food purchasing. I just say I'm buying more for more. Over half of families in Iowa are receiving SNAP benefits. Or over half the families that are receiving SNAP benefits in Iowa are working families, meaning that the household has some income. 2/3 of SNAP recipients are children, they're seniors, and they're people with disabilities. And then skipping to food banks. So what is a food bank? I think food bank and food pantry get used interchangeably a lot, and we do similar work, but we do it really differently. So a food bank, by definition, it's a nonprofit organization that collects and distributes food to hunger relief charities and community organizations like food pantries, meal sites, shelters. We work with vendors like wholesalers, manufacturers to purchase food, TFAP, that's the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or USDA food, as you may hear it called. And we also build relationships with donors to realize excess, damaged, and close-dated foods that aren't fit for consumption, not fit for sale, but they're still completely fine for consumption. Food banks act as distribution centers. So we leverage purchasing power, strong relationships with those donors, and an extensive network of partners to distribute millions of pounds of food every month and year to our food insecure neighbors. To break it down further, I always use Target as an example. So I think everyone can relate to Target. A food bank is like the Target distribution center. We get all the goods in, and then our partners, our food pantries, are those Target retail stores. They order their inventory through us, and then we deliver it to them. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. In Iowa, there are 6 food banks serving all 99 of our counties. Through our network of over 1,200 partners, meal sites, veterans programs, backpack, and school pantries, we distributed over 49 million pounds of food in fiscal year 22. I don't have the exact math on this, but an average semi-truck holds about 40,000 pounds. So whatever that math is, that if you multiply divide 49 million by 40,000, that's how many semi-trucks of food Iowa deliver to food insecure neighbors. So now we're gonna focus on hunger specifically in Iowa. Iowa is a leader in agriculture. I think you've all learned that today or already knew that. And it's often said that we feed the world, but what about our food insecure neighbors? Like I said earlier, food insecurity doesn't have a look, it doesn't have a uniform. It really is our friends, our neighbors, our family members. 1 in 10 Iowans experience food insecurity, which is approximately 238,000 people. And food insecurity, it's not always that person living under the bridge that's starving. It's maybe I ate breakfast, but I don't know where lunch and dinner are coming from. Maybe it's I have food during the week because I go to school and I get that free and reduced breakfast and lunch, but I don't have dinner and I don't know what to do on the weekends. So when we talk about how to fix food insecurity, it's often suggested that we raise the minimum wage. I recently learned this talking point, and I think it's really interesting. We're talking about $15 an hour in Polk County, which is probably one of the more expensive counties. But the living wage for a family of 4, so like 2 grown-ups, 2 children, needs to be $16.60 an hour just to meet basic needs. So, and that's just your food, your shelter. That might not even cover your car. So that kind of puts things into perspective about how much that minimum wage needs to be raised and then what that gap looks like. Through our food bank network, about 50% of the food we distribute is donated by retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers. I work closely with those people to realize those food donations through the Emerson Act or the Good Samaritan Act, which says if you're donating something in good faith, you're not held liable if someone, for whatever reason, becomes ill because of it. Close dated, that's also a somewhat controversial talking point, those expiration dates. We get a lot of close dated food because canned tomatoes last at least a year after their best by date. You can't sell those in a store, but that's the perfect donation for me. That dented cereal box, you're probably not gonna grab that on the shelf of your grocery store, but that's a great donation for me. So having those conversations, donating food is a creative way to avoid waste, realize tax benefits, and then ensure our neighbors are fed. We're continually looking for more creative ways to get more fresh foods into our network through creative programming and innovative partnerships, which Sam is going to talk about now.
Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon, the post-lunch slump, maybe. I'll try to keep us moving along. My name is Sam Schweppe, and I'm the senior manager on our agri-food engagement team at Feeding America. Also, I'm a farmer from southern Indiana. My family owns and operates a 6th-generation dairy farm. And when I was growing up, my family was a foster family, and we hosted children, during my childhood growing up. We hosted over 100 different children in our home, and we had people from every race and ethnic background, I think, almost. Obviously not everyone, because there was only 100, but we had quite the diversity in our house. And when you got home from school, you never knew who was going to be living with you in the afternoon. So it definitely taught me to be flexible and willing to work with people who are different than me in like very close ways, because we all shared a home and we shared our meals. But that's kind of like the background that I bring to this, because when I think about my work at Feeding America, I think about one specific little boy who came to live with us, and he was 8 years old, and he had gray hair, and his skin was flaking off. And obviously, children do not end up in the foster care system if things are going well in their life. But here we had this little 8-year-old boy with gray hair that was actually like falling out because he was so malnourished. And it was about a month after he was living with us, we learned that his hair was actually red, and he had freckles, and you would not have recognized him had you seen him a month earlier. And so understanding the impact that food has, especially on children, is what drives me in the mission and the work I do at Feeding America. So through a network of more than 200 food banks, like the Food Bank of Iowa, which Emily is from, that's here in Des Moines, and 21 state food bank associations, such as the Iowa Food Bank Association that we have learned from today, and over 60,000 partner agencies, which are food pantries or meal programs. The Feeding America Network collects food and financial donations and moves and distributes food to communities who need it and advocates to end hunger in America. We know that food insecurity exists in every county, parish, and borough in the United States. It impacts people of all ages, races, ethnicities, abilities, and beliefs. People of color experience food insecurity and its underlying drivers disproportionately compared to white people. And disparities can be attributed to structural and institutional racism and discrimination, which has systemic barriers to education, employment, housing opportunities, and more. Some of the highest local rates of food insecurity are found in rural areas as well. In supporting community-led change that improves food insecurity and addresses root cause, particularly in communities of color and rural communities who are disproportionately impacted by hunger, is foundational to advancing our bold aspirations for our nation. Those aspirations are that every community and each person within it has access to food and resources that they say they desire and need to thrive, and that the food insecurity rate is 5% by 2030, and disparities by race and place are cut in half. Feeding America is the largest hunger relief organization in the U.S., and last year the Feeding America Network helped tens of millions of people in America. We reached every county in the U.S., provided 5.2 billion meals, rescued 3.6 billion pounds of groceries from going to waste, and enabled 247 million meals through SNAP application assistance. At Feeding America, we're always looking for new ways to recover and upcycle food products and serve additional communities. So in partnership with processors, we're exploring impactful food rescue programs like our cheese program, which is called Shredding Hunger, and our latest program is a back-to-school high-protein smoothie. And this is where we've developed a consistent source of raw materials to be able to provide dense dairy nutrition for foods for just distributions throughout our network. So how do these supply chain collaborations work? Well, when you think about cheese, think about the cheese that you buy in the deli. It's round, and for whatever reason in the United States, we like to put round cheese on square bread when we make a sandwich. However, cheese is made in large blocks. So when those rounds are cut, there are a lot of like little ends and pieces left over. So those excess trimmings, they're often discarded as waste, or they're used in animal food or some other type of other use. So this program repurposes this excess cheese, and it collects these high-quality remnants and puts them to good use. So product is identified, and we actively work with manufacturers and packagers around the country to source these cheese trimmings, and transportation is arranged so that the product is picked up by our transportation partner, and it's delivered to a processor. And then once shredded, the cheese is repackaged into family-size units and then distributed. So after packaging, this newly shredded cheese is handed off to local food banks at a very discounted price. Collaborative relationships enable success. And Feeding America partners source ingredient donations from ingredient manufacturers and convert them into nutrient-dense and delicious products for food banks. So our most recent collaboration took high-quality dairy powders and proteins that were slightly out of customer specifications and repurposed them into a delicious back-to-school smoothie. So once again, product is identified and partners actively work with the ingredient manufacturers, and they source these excess ingredients that would otherwise go to waste. Then the ingredient companies, they donate their formulation expertise, right? They're the chef in the kitchen, and they help to create a balanced nutritional food or like a beverage with the identified ingredients that are available. And then finally, that recipe is manufactured, and our partners collaborate and share their knowledge and expertise, and they donate the knowledge and the expertise and the ingredients, and then we put all of these things together and we have this wonderful finished product. So I hope everyone is hearing like the key words here, like partner, 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 and collaboration and sharing. And I know post-COVID, we're seeing so many new non-traditional partnerships where people are coming together to do wonderful things in our communities. So as the largest food waste rescue organization in the U.S., Feeding America is uniquely positioned to rescue food at each of these stages and help to provide it to families facing hunger. So the collaborative relationships enable our partners to capture the food that's falling out of traditional supply chain models and upcycle this food to its highest use, which is human consumption. And with the enormous scale of food waste that we have here in the United States, there's one thing that is clear. Food rescue can help us solve the hunger crisis. One of the lesser known and most frustrating facts about hunger in the U.S. is we have enough food for everyone. Food just doesn't get to the people that need it. In the United States, hunger is a logistics problem. It's not a food production problem. Everyone needs nutritious food to thrive. And in every community in America, people are working hard to provide for themselves and their families. Yet in 2021, we had 31 million people, or 1 in 10 million people, who face food insecurity in the U.S., while $200 billion is annually spent on food that will never be eaten. The loss of food occurs at every stage of our production and distribution system, from farmers to packers and shippers, from manufacturers to retailers and consumers. Think about that last head of lettuce you had in the refrigerator that went bad, right? Didn't quite finish it. Elimination of food waste provides multiple solutions to challenges that our communities face. It's imperative that Feeding America drives innovation to recover food products to increase community nutrition. The annual value of food wasted globally is estimated at $1 trillion, and about 40% of food produced, processed, and transported in the U.S. is wasted or ends up in a landfill, and approximately 10% of food waste comes from our food production in our processing and manufacturing industries. So it's estimated that 33% of all food in the U.S., or 80 million tons, goes straight to landfill, incineration, or down the drain, or it's simply left in the field to rot. That's almost 149 billion meals worth of food. And we're letting that go unsold or uneaten each year. That is roughly 2% of our U.S. GDP. The impacts of surplus food and food waste on our climate and environment are enormous. And since food that is never eaten still requires resources to grow, harvest, transport, cool, cook, or otherwise prepare, even when it ends up being disposed of, it uses resources. So around the world, food waste has been recognized as an urgent issue that's requiring immediate action. The United Nations, the U.S. government, the European Parliament, global business coalitions such as the Consumer Goods Forum, and more have all set goals to cut food loss and waste in half by 2025 or 2030. So through our alternative sourcing models, Feeding America has developed consistent sources of raw materials to provide reliable, delivered, low-cost price or donated food to food banks across the country. These programs pair consistent dairy supply with multiple processing partners and often provide low-cost delivery that supports expanded dairy distribution and transportation from multi-stop opportunities at our food banks. So growing regional and national food recovery collaborations with strategic agri-industry partners, this elevates the public sector role, and it maximizes our food sourcing and sharing and supports our network food banks in capability and capacity growth. All of this while increasing the nutrition and addressing nutrient deficiencies in our communities. So with additions of programs like Shredding Hunger or the Back to School Smoothie, we create distribution models that provide healthy agri-food opportunities that supply important nutrients such as protein, calcium, and vitamins A and B12, along with zinc, phosphorus, and riboflavin. So many of our neighbors are facing hunger, and the amount of food that is thrown out and allowed to go to waste, it's shocking. So the potential for helping hungry people and our environment by eliminating food waste is enormous. So bold solutions require not only broad support, including critical federal investments and policy changes, but also inclusive approaches that prioritize the voices of people with lived experience, learning directly from individuals what they need to thrive in their communities. This is a nationwide movement to end hunger, one we hope will engage every individual, every elected official, and organization around the country. If we do that, we will ensure everyone in the U.S., no matter their race, background, or zip code, will have access to the food and resources they need to thrive. So today, I would like to ask everyone in the room, we invite you to join us, and let's manifest a shared vision where no one is hungry and race and place disparities are eliminated as we collectively work together. And last, but certainly not least, I would like to thank everyone for the opportunity to share our team's work. And Emily, thank you for presenting along with me today. And thank you to everyone in the room for sitting through our session. Please contact me or Emily if you have questions. And actually, we have time for questions now if anybody has questions. I will say that the Food Bank of Iowa has been participating in the Shredded Cheese Recovery Program, and if Emily could provide specifics on that if you would like to hear firsthand experience. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions?
No.
I know it's the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part. Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to tell you about blocking hunger, and then I will think about your answer.
Good.
So Casey asked what my favorite part of my job was. I don't know the answer to that, so I'm going to think about it while I talk about something that's completely unrelated. In addition, it is cheese related, I should say. One of the really interesting things, so I think everyone thinks about like milk, if I could just get a glass of milk, but nutritionally, like a little piece of cheese can be just as nutrient dense and nutritionally equal to milk. So cheese is just another opportunity. They also have a blocking hunger program where they take those ends and they compress them with, is it like a vacuum pack into a block? So that's another way to reclaim waste or repurpose waste. My favorite part of my job, I guess I recently came to the realization I'm never more aware of, well, I'm going to take a poll since it's the end of the day. How many people have been to a grocery store with a child, let's say under the age of 10? Okay, it's a little bit of a minefield sometimes. I am never more aware of my food security than when I am shopping with my 2-year-old. If he doesn't want one of the 4 snacks I've packed and he's getting emotional, I can take something off the shelf and I don't have to think about it. And if he starts crying, I can just give him this snack. And I think hearing about parents, especially mothers, really resonates with me now, knowing that these children are being fed, knowing what a difference it makes. Like when I get snacks in, I got a load of RX bars. If you've ever had them, they're delicious. They're really expensive, but I was able to get a donated load of those. And knowing that a child could go to their teacher and be like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna have this snack. Now I can focus. I can, do better." It's just this giant tapestry, and food is one part of it. So whenever I can do something like that, too, just knowing that, okay, this child has this snack, so they can take a test, they can read a book, they can do something like that, really means a lot. And I will say, one of the things I miss about a food pantry is I don't do that direct service as often. So every time I get to hear those stories, is great. Yes.
Well, first a comment. I just want to say I really appreciated both presentations and the emphasis on thinking about hunger as a issue of poverty, that this is an issue of logistics as well, that like the language around like getting food to people based on what they say they need and want, like the community having the intelligence to know what they need, and sort of like all of that participatory and inclusive pieces. Like I really deeply appreciate that. So thank you.
Thanks.
My question is, you talked about partnership, collaboration, like sharing resources or best practices. Like, do you have any thoughts on like what are some of the best practices that you've seen in terms of like knowing what the community needs and being able to listen to what people say that they need and want?
Yeah.
Like who's doing a good job at that? How does it get done?
I'm the first to say I'm far from perfect with that. I always welcome feedback on one of the hardest parts of my job, to kind of like conversely to Casey's question, is that we can't do everything for everyone. I try, for every person that's asking for a gallon of fresh milk, there's somebody else that's like, yeah, but I really need shelf-stable milk because that's what's helpful. So trying to find that balance. I think just listening to our partners, and whenever we have the opportunity to do that, I know that all food banks like to survey their partners. They like to hear from their partners with whatever. So whenever we can hear from our partners that are like, you know what, like this specific thing is really helpful. And whenever I can make that happen, for example, and again, I'm just talking about myself, but there's food sourcers at every food bank, and I think they would probably share similar sentiments. We do have to balance we can do with we can do the most with the least amount of money. And so I think we try to provide as much as we can, and then we really do empower our communities to be like, step up and be like, you know what, there's this bank here. Did you know you have a food pantry down the street? And just really try to empower the communities, because a lot of time, like I didn't know there was a food pantry in Urbandale. Whenever we can try to make those connections with those local businesses, those other community organizations with the partner agency in town, we try to do that. I don't know if that answered your question or not. We try.
So I'm going to combine both of your questions. So specifically, where can we find things that are working well? And I'll say one of the favorite things about my job is that I get to manage grants. So then I get to read grant reports. And in this last year, Feeding America invested $10 million in the Equitable Access Agri Grant, and that was specifically focused on 31 food banks, and it was based on population and racial disparities and need in the food bank area, and also the amount of rural population that was served. And the investments in these communities created transformational change with the food banks. It helped them start new partnerships, new collaborations, find new ways of working. It allowed them to invest back in their local community. And one of the things that came back in the grant was we did a pilot to try and see how shelf-stable lactose-free milk would be accepted, because we know there's a gap, that there are ethnicities who are lactose intolerant, and USDA currently does not provide funding for that food, but there is a gap, and we would like to learn more about that and how we can be better servants to our communities. And in the grant report, I learned that one of the food banks actually had worked with their pantry who had a need for lactose-free milk for food boxes for hospice patients. And I'm always the one who gets up and says, oh my gosh, every time I hear what's going on in a school pantry, that is like totally what drives me. And when I read that this food was going in hospice food boxes, I thought, wow, I did not know food banks were doing that work. That's incredible. As I know, almost everyone is touched by hospice work at some time in their life, and I feel like hospice people are the closest things to angel on earth. And to know that the work that we're doing is helping support that is just like, you cannot stuff any more joy in my heart than like learning that, getting to read that grant report. So.
What are your guys' recommendations for like personal food waste management?
That's a really good question.
I love that. I love that question, because we all have personal responsibility in being good members of our community, right? And when I hear from someone like, it doesn't matter what I do because, it's not going to change anything. That's not true. One person can have a huge impact. I took my 4-H team, or my 4-H club, to a ball game in St. Louis, right? And it was the worst Cardinals game of the whole season. We were so lucky to attend that one. And we were, of course, up in the nosebleed seats. And there was a guy in the section beside us, and he started the wave. Like, he started the wave. One guy started the wave, and it was almost a sellout crowd that night. And it went around for like 45 minutes. So I'm just going to say, one person can make a change. And like, I love that guy did that. I would like love to give him like his favorite cookies or something, because that taught my 4-H club an incredible lesson that one person can make a huge difference in so many people's life.
I think too, educating yourself. I think a huge amount of food waste in this country is tied to food dating. And food dating is tied to food quality, not food safety. So what I mean by that, obviously a food is going to taste best on or before its best by date. And there's use by date, best by date, sell by date. That in and of it, that's a whole other conversation. But I think just educating yourself, like I know before I came to the food bank, I would be like, oh my gosh, these canned beans expired on the 6th. Like, we need to get them out of here. Those canned beans are good. They are food safe to eat, probably 2 years beyond that date. So I think educating yourself on food dates. There's also no waste cookbooks. So like, I think of carrot tops. Like, you can make pesto with carrot tops and then eat the carrot. So that type of personal education. And then like Sam said, if you try, you do as much as you can. I know don't do it, but composting is another thing. I know we at the food bank, we have donated to the zoo, the Blank Park Zoo. We got some melons in, and they were still fine. They maybe had a crack in it, and that creates a huge mess. We can't keep them, but they're still great melons. So we contacted the zoo, and I think like a giraffe ate them or something. And so there are just little things like that, but I think dating really resonates with me. Yeah.
Along food waste topic, who owns food waste? That's one aspect of it. Where along the value chain is the food waste occurring, and how is it being tackled?
Yeah.
Related to food bank and related to People America, does 40% of people that you touch have any
Super good question. So just to repeat, he was asking who owns the food waste? Where does it happen in that chain? I think it happens at every aspect. I can talk from a food bank perspective. I think personal food waste is part, like I definitely have put a salad mix in the vegetable crisper, and like even though it's a vegetable, I don't know why I put it down there because it's just this like abyss of, I just never looked in there. I think I shouldn't say quality standards, but for example, I got a donation, a truckload of pork fritters because they were the wrong diameter. They didn't meet customer standards. I got another donation of pasta because the noodle had a higher than normal amount of cracking in it. I don't think consumers would ever notice that, but it didn't meet the quality, or it didn't meet the customer standards. So I do think what I see is a huge amount of waste at the production level. It's just a mistake, things happen. I've got hams because they're too pink. I've gotten meat because it has extra moisture in it. So that's where I see a lot of food waste, and then that's where we have to step in. I mean, that's my entire job, is letting people know, here's this opportunity, here's this option. A lot of companies, food production, waste is just a cost of doing business. My ignorance, I didn't know you had to pay to throw things away. It's hundreds of dollars to throw things away at the landfill. Making sure that they know not only can you save that, certainly there's things that's like, I'm sorry, I can't accept that. The milk got too warm or something. There's definitely food safety issues, but the majority of things can be reworked, relabeled. I'm taking Triscuits right now. They say organic on them. They're not organic. We're taking a Sharpie and crossing out organic, and that's a donor-directed thing. So just letting people know that food banks, food pantries exist, that we're an option for this waste, and then just talking to them like, we can rework this. No, it doesn't matter if the ham is too pink, like, because, things like that. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, part of that then though is when you get the food out of the food bank,
Yeah.
how much of that actually makes it into people's mouths? Do you know? Is it
Our-
80%? Is it 60%?
Our weight, I mean, we have, I'm blanking on the term.
Let me help you.
Yeah.
Okay. We have data that's very specific to that, and if you will email me or just get with me afterwards, I will give that to you, but I will not quote a number that I'm not responsible for, but I will get you the information, like back on that. I will follow up with you on that, because I think I know what it is, but I do not want to say it without having like the actual information like right in front of me.
I have my thought about me. I realized the word. So we have, we have people that specifically work with our partner agencies to ensure that your temperature is maintained. You aren't keeping things long beyond. You're not hoarding food. So I don't have a percentage on it. I would say from a food bank, our food, less than 3% is wasted. I think it's actually less than 1% is wasted, and the waste is compost because produce. But we do have people that check with food pantries to ensure food is going out the door. I don't have control over it once somebody takes it home, but we know that our food consistently goes out the door. We have agencies ordering every month. We distribute millions of pounds. I mean, the state distributes millions of pounds of food. So I guess I don't have a specific number, but we see people we're distributing food. That to me says that it's going to people.
One more thing, and then I'll and for those of you in the room who have ag, food, restaurant, like background, understanding food inspection and food safety, food banks are inspected just like our processing plants are inspected, our dairy farms are inspected. So our food bank and our restaurants are inspected. There is a system that ensures food safety adherence at food banks as well. Yes.
So what's your greatest success as a relationship or partnership? How did you keep it going?
My greatest success. That would probably be, pounds wise?
Just anything that
Okay. So there's an excess dairy recovery program that was started in 2012, and where there was milk being dumped in Michigan, and it was a processing partnership between a processor and a cooperative, and also USDA had to be involved because there are different rules about very deep into this, federal milk marketing orders. So it was a huge collaboration. A lot of people had to agree on how this was going to work. There were small pilots in Michigan, small pilots in Ohio and Kentucky. And then during COVID, when we had all the extreme supply chain disruption, that small pilot that was like 150 gallons of milk a day went into millions of gallons. So that's maybe it, I would say. Probably the most pounds impact, we'll say. Yep.
I don't know if this one is one of the more memorable ones. I will say it's not necessarily the biggest pounds or anything like that, but there's a local dairy in town, and we got a call from them a few years ago, and they said, we have excess skim milk because it's ice cream season. I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, ice cream season's 12 months a year. Like, what are you talking about? But dairies, they produce milk, and then they skim the fat off, and then they use that for the ice cream, but then they had excess skim milk. And she said, would you like it? And I was like, yes, of course. There's definitely been some pauses in relationship. COVID, they translated to retail orders, but we now buy milk from them. So it started as a donation. They throw in extra whenever they can. So that was kind of just a really creative partnership. It let me know there's a dairy, right down the road, it's 45 minutes away, but just something like that. Those relationships do exist. I don't always work with the big giant, is that my time? That horn? It's not always the hugest producers, but sometimes it was maybe 200 gallons a week, which, we could send that out in one order. But that is a hugely memorable donation partnership.
Do we have any other questions? No?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you for asking questions and being an engaged and interested audience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.